Yeah, and welcome to another edition of Pitt Panther Talk here on Pittsburgh Sports Now. Mike Vikovcan, joined by the recruiting guru in Pittsburgh, Harry Pasaris. Harry, it's a good look for you. You are pumping today.
You know what? We moved our martial arts school outside at a park, but in 80-degree weather, humid, not the best move. So, yeah, I'm pretty sweaty right now. I just got back a little bit ago.
Yeah, me too. I just cut the grass here, and it's not like before. We used to cut the grass when you were in your 20s. You were done in 15, 20 minutes. You're okay. Now age creeps up a little bit, and it feels like you ran a marathon when you cut your grass. But let's get into what we're here for. But we first want to mention that all of our shows here on Pittsburgh Sports Now, in terms of Pitt Panther Talk, are sponsored by the Buhl Insurance Agency. We appreciate Aaron Buhl, who's a big supporter of Pitt Athletics. It's a time of the year if you need your boat, home, new business, home, car, whatever, your kid's starting to drive like Harry's, in car insurance, give Aaron a call, 724-443-5610. He has offices in Gibsonia, Warrendale, Butler, Mars, Allison Park. Call Aaron and his team to get a quote. All right, Harry, let's get to it. Since the last time we talked, Pitt picked up 3 commitments, all in the secondary, and I think that's a big theme.
Right.
Noah Biglow, Khalil Anderson, and Stefan Hall. Let's go, before we go down long-term ramifications of all this, I know you broke down the tape on each of these guys. Let's start off with the one that they got last week, and that's Noah Biglow. What type of player are they getting? His first thing I see is a ball hawk. What about you?
Exactly. And where this kid made his name and where he solidified himself on the map in terms of recruiting was the playoffs last year. And I want to see it 4 to 5 interceptions in the playoffs. To your point, he's a ball hawk. He's 6 foot. He's a little thin, but they're all thin, essentially, coming out of high school. They all need a little bit of weight. He's a fluid athlete. Great vision, and to your point, he just seems to be in the right spot, which you can't always teach. The right spot at the right time to get the interception. Great cover corner. He's going to flourish in Pitt's program once they get him with the proper nutrition. And you're going to hear me repeat this theme over and over again with all 3 prospects, and get him in with Coach Stachiani and getting lifting weights. I mean, I think he's going to have to add probably about 15 to 20 more pounds, but what you're looking at is someone at Armwood High School out of Sefner, Florida, it's an outstanding program, a blue chip athlete. There's a lot to work with in the future, and he's already showing those instincts and skills you need as a corner that's going to be out there on an island in the ACC. So I like his length as well. There's a lot of length to be had there. Just has to add the muscle, but great pickup, tons of potential.
Similar to Kaleo Anderson, who's a guy that they picked up last night, announced around 9 p.m. out of the Atlanta, Georgia area. Similar players?
Somewhat. I see Anderson a little more versatile. He's going to play in the secondary. Anderson's a little more put together. Dynamic. He looks like someone, to me, they could actually end up playing on both sides of the ball. Has a little more wiggle. But when you watch his film, you hate to keep repeating the same terminology, but he's a ball hawk. Really impressive. He can really lay the wood. This kid is a big hitter as well. They're built a little bit differently to me. Biglow to me is a little leaner, longer. There's a lot to work with there, where Anderson's kind of more, almost felt like a safety, more compact. But to be able to crack the Metro Atlanta area was big. That is a treasure trove of talent right there. And that, Riverwood High School is a tremendous program. So I will say this, both with Anderson and Biglow, you're looking at, again, 2 players that are playing at a very high level of high school football with tremendous competition, and they're performing well, and they're both ball hawks. So that really bodes well, because you're looking at potential at this point moving forward. 2 fantastic pickups, and I'm anxious to see them both when they're both out on an island in the ACC here at Heinz Field.
And Stefan Hall, he was the first guy yesterday. I know a little bit about him, talking with some people at Central Valley. He's a guy that I think I think a lot of these guys, you can say their best is yet to come. But I think that it really goes with Stefan, the fact that he didn't play his sophomore year. He played last year, did well, but there's not a lot of tape on these guys. Some of these guys have been playing since their freshman year, and Stefan started out at Woodland Hills, went to Central Valley, was injured, and then he finally got on the field last year. And I think he's really going to excel this year. And I think it's good for Pitt. It's big for Pitt, the fact that they were able to pick him up now, as opposed to maybe waiting for the season to go on and having other programs really see the type of potential this guy has. Because I think he's a guy that not only I think can cover, but also he can play the run. He's not afraid to get up and get dirty.
Well, first and foremost, it's nice to add a little bit of local flavor. But when I look at him, I see the word raw. There's a lot to work with. You can't teach 6'2". But to your point, I tell you, when you watch his film for the limited amount of time, there's a little, not a lot, but a little right now, but a little bit of Paris Ford in that he goes from point A to point B and can really lay the wood. Now, you don't see him covering too much, and I think they're going to work on that here the senior year. It seems like a liability, and they're going to work on that. I'll say this too: at 6'2", he's exceptionally thin if you look at him. But despite his lack of bulk, the physicality is there. There's a lot to work with. But he's raw, and in all fairness, the competition he's going to have in Beaver County isn't close to what you might find that Khalil Anderson and Noah Biglow are dealing with, in all fairness. But that doesn't mean he can't turn into an exceptional player. I just think right now there's a lot to mold, but I think Pitt's a great situation for him. Yep. He's going to go in. I said this before. He's going to hit the weight room. He's going to get proper nutrition. They're going to offer that young man stability, a family there. And I think there's a lot there where he could flourish, and I expect him to do so.
I think it's interesting. Over the last couple Pitt Panther talks, we have talked about the scholarship board starting to compact a little bit. And I think, meaning spots running out too, as commitments start to pile up, that means opportunities for other players start to diminish. And I think that was definitely a factor with Hall. He wanted to get on the bus before the bus took off without him, right?
Precisely. And he mentioned this, and this is something I want Pitt fans to remember. They could tend to be myopic in their thinking at times, and they tend to be, I always say this, they tend to be fatalistic. And because you and I deal with this on Twitter all the time. But this is a good example where had one of the Southern players committed the day prior, he probably would have been out of scholarship. But keep in mind, Pitt was his first offer, and they've been waiting for him to commit. So there would have been 20 DMs to me or tweets complaining that we didn't take the local player when the offer was there the whole time, and he's been sitting on it. So this worked out well. But when we talk about timing on an offer, there is a limit where it expires. So I think, and he admitted this, he saw this class filling up. And to his credit, he put that together and decided why wait, and he came on board. And I'm excited. I think he's going to make a great safety down. I think he needs a few years of reps through the system and putting on some weight, but he's going to be a good player.
Let's get into the coaching, because anytime you were able to land these type of players, it all starts with the relationships with the coaches. And last week we hit upon the job that Chris Beatty was doing. It's time now to give Archie Collins a little love. Beatty's hit the Virginia area, which is hard to deal with. But the same goes with Archie in Georgia, and that might be more difficult. You're dealing with Georgia. You're dealing with Georgia Tech. You're dealing with all those Florida schools. You're dealing with the SEC down there. And to his credit, and also to Pitt's credit, because I don't always want to give the 100% credit to him. There has to have been other coaches involved, but he's been the lead recruiter on 5 of these guys that they've gotten in the last 2 years. And as you know, Georgia is not an easy place to go, but Archie's done it, and he's gotten 5 kids. So hats off to him.
Precisely. What I hear a lot from the players, the Georgia players that have committed, even those that haven't committed, they'll go, "That's my man," when they hear Collins' name. Yep. That's key, though. And you hear a lot of that about Beatty as well. What does that mean? These are coaches that understand these young men and know how to build rapport. And to me, to me, when you look at Charlie Partridge, you look at Chris Beatty, these guys were established. I knew they were good. You didn't have to convince me. Archie Collins is emerging as a shining star on this staff. He's doing a great job. And, like I said, it's the commonalities you see with a lot of these greats that are luring these kids in and landing them. And that's that ability to connect and maintain that rapport and that trust. And he's doing it right now. He's doing a fantastic job. And I to regress a little bit, I tweeted about this yesterday too. He's doing it. If you're looking at Georgia, you have California, Texas, and Florida as your top three. If you look at usually in terms of your pools of recruiting and your hotbeds, Georgia's a top 5 state. It comes in after that. So tapping into it and fighting away your Georgia and your Georgia Techs is really impressive. And I would just press on because it's a treasure trove of talent. And we're pulling them away from those 2 hometown schools, home state schools. I think it's great.
We're sitting, actually Pitt's sitting at 16 commitments now. And now's the time where I start, I term it, they're going to start doing some selective shopping as far as players they're going to get. And this is when it starts to get interesting. And I think it's also I think it's a real sign now of players that they really want. At the beginning, when you're first taking commitments, you might take a chance on some players and hope that they develop. When you start getting down to 6, 7, 8 scholarships left, and you still need to hit certain positions, you're only taking kids that you really want. So this next couple months or whatever, however long it takes, it should be interesting because you're going to see the recruiting board start to really narrow, right?
Oh, it has to be. And to your point, if I'm a recruit and I'm considering the University of Pittsburgh and it's a need position, and we'll discuss some of those, now's the time. I mean, now's the time to commit or come awful close because those scholarships are going to be gone. And we just kind of discussed that with the safety situation. But, I mean, when you look at it right now, and I'm looking at some positions, tight end, the infamous tight end, the bane of the existence of the staff. They did offer a great prospect recently out of Louisiana. They're still on some tight ends in need position. D tackle, we're going to be losing several tremendous players to the pros next year. And so I think at this point, at least 2, and there are 2 locals that are there, Donald and Ford. And I know the staff would love to add them. They're going to have to remain patient. So do we stay with those 2, or do we just bring someone else in? It might bump them. And they're both excellent players, I believe, and it's been kind of articulated, the staff wants one more offensive lineman. And they're on several prospects right now. They can be a little bit more selective as well because, they've added 4. So there's a lot of positions still that are out there. You're probably going to see another linebacker join the class. But the beauty with the staff is they've done so well in this remarkable condition with the COVID here and the pandemics that they've done a great job that they can be a lot more selective and add tremendous talent.
You touched upon a couple of the defensive tackles, and I think that's going to be a real interesting because they didn't take a player last year. Tim Brown, he had the off the field issues. He was committed, didn't take him, so they didn't add a defensive tackle, and they're going to need to, as you mentioned. They're losing a couple to graduation this year. And the 2 guys, Dorien Ford and Elliot Donald, it's interesting because both those guys are high-level recruits, meaning that they have, their pick of their Power 5 programs trying to land them. I know their intention was prior to COVID to make official visits. How do you see that shaking out with them? Do you think they're just going to, just speculation, but are they going to wait this thing out and want to take those official visits because they're big enough? And doesn't that put Pitt in a little bit of a bind because they have both those guys high on their list, and it looks as though if all things hold out, they're going to have to wait for these guys. Is that the right plan for Pitt?
Both are what we call sometimes must-haves or must-waits. In other words, we're going to wait for them regardless. That scholarship's going to be there. It's a tough position. Won't shock me because there's going to be flexibility in numbers, and it always happens. You're going to have some players leaving. It's going to be a big class in general, but you might have some attrition after this. Wouldn't shock me if you see them even add a 3rd defensive tackle waiting on the other 2, almost as an insurance policy. In other words, you might see that flex up. You might end up bringing in 3D tackles. But essentially, you have to play the waiting game. And the tough part about that, and I don't know if fans realize that, is you might have 2 or 3 knocking on the door wanting to commit, and you got to kind of hold those guys back. So it wouldn't shock me if we see at least one taken, waiting on the other 2. It's a little bit of insurance, and even if they both come on board, then you have 3 quality tackles in place. But it's a tough call, but I think for now they're going to hold those spots. I would anyways. It's we're kind of dwindling down the post-COVID phase here, and we'll see what happens. And I'm sure those players want to get the decision with over fairly soon as well. So I would wait it out and see what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting that both Ford and Donald, the two, while they had hoped to make visits now, the 2 places aside from Pitt that are still on both their lists that they have been able to visit are Penn State and West Virginia. So you never know. They might just say, we've seen enough, and maybe, who knows where they're going to go. Obviously,
right.
People expect Donald to be a Pitt lean, but you never know what's transpired. And Dorien Ford, he's sort of been quiet this whole time. I don't think anyone knows.
Very hard to read him. I agree.
Very hard. Let's get 2 more quick points, Harry. Defensive backs. They got 4 in this class. However, after this season, that whole defensive backfield is pretty much going to be gone. You're going to be starting anew with Pinnock, Mathis, Ford, and Hamlin all gone. Do you see them, and they still have a lot of young players. Do you see them possibly trying to add another defensive back, or, is 4 enough?
That's a great question, because you think of Rashawn Battle, Buddy Mack, Javonte Royal, and Hunter Sellers from the last class. Although Battle has a big frame, I could see him as an outside linebacker. But you start to put all that together. By the way, mostly Southern, very long DBs, kind of a trend there. I could possibly see 1 more in the class, and there's a group out of Georgia, a couple out of Florida that they're on and they like. But at most 1. And again, that all depends on how things play out. But I think this is going to be a big class, so that flexibility may be there. But my gut tells me they're done, but it wouldn't shock me if they see 1 more added.
Yeah, I agree. I would. My guess would be that 90% or plus of the guys that have had offers from Pitt, those offers aren't committable anymore. And I think
they're off the table.
Yeah, I think they would have 2 or 3 guys that they want to would take regardless, and they're going to give them the opportunity. And if they say no, then they could be done with defensive backs. But very few guys, I think, that as far as defensive backs still have a committable offer for Pitt. Last thing is, beginning of last week, we ran a PSN poll question. We asked our readers out there, of all the newcomers, meaning either transfers or freshmen that'll be coming into the program. We're trying to start a little talk of football here and actually talk football and not, recruiting for the whole time.
Right.
We asked them which newcomer are they looking forward to seeing the most. I'm going to ask you the same question: offense, defense, or either one. Which
I'm not going to talk about any defensive recruit. And the reason I'm not doing that, because I think there's a ton of potential there with Hayes, Roberts. Pitt is so deep on defense, in all fairness. And that's 0 to do with their ability, because I think Roberts and like Hayes, like I said, they're going to be really good. They're not going to see the field. So let's look at on offense. And I'll say this first, the transfer, I hate to state the obvious, but Pitt's tight end play has been rancid. I'm trying to find a great adjective. Horrific. So Crawl is, to me, looking at the guy, huge, athletic. He has 1 year to prove himself to pro scouts. So I can't wait to see what he does. I think it's going to be fascinating. Second of all, Izzy.
Yeah.
Abakanab, I can never say his last name. Abakananda. I'm ripping that apart. Izzy, I apologize. But Izzy's 200 pounds, versatile, fast, Gatorade Player of the Year in New York. We have a lot of running backs, but boy, he's a game breaker. I see him getting reps. I think he's going to be a lot of fun. And then, I'm throwing a bunch of names. The last 2 is Jordan Addison and Jalen Barden. Addison is there, massive playmaker, learning the system with the team. It'll be fun to watch him. And I love Jalen Barden's swagger. I love players with swagger. Our site interviewed him. He talked a big game, and I'm expecting a big game. So I think it's going to be fun on offense to see these guys emerge. And I said this the last time we spoke. Our wide receiving core needs a kick in the butt with all the drops, and it's great to see all this young talent that might emerge. All
right, Harry. Great insight from you as always, and we will hopefully do this soon. We teased last time, we didn't do it, but we're gonna do that within this next week, as we're gonna get recruiting stories from Harry. That'd be a lot of fun. That's our plan for this coming week. So hopefully we can pull that off sometime by the weekend. But we appreciate the time, Harry, and let's get together soon.
Sounds good. Always great talking with you, Mike, and everybody out there. Stay safe and happy.
We appreciate Pitt Panther Talk here on Pittsburgh Sports Now, sponsored by the Buhl Insurance Agency, 724-443-5610. Thank you.